Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the very first of the Save Your Wardrobe sessions. It's today, November 12, 2020. Today, we'll be discussing what fashion citizenship means related to step one of our Empower Your Wardrobe manifesto, which is be a citizen and not a consumer. The session will last 45 minutes, so let's get started. My name's Melanie Rickey. I'm a fashion journalist who's passionate about sharing the sustainability message to those still engaging with fast fashion and throwaway culture while respecting their budget and lifestyle. We really can show this audience there's a fun, engaging, easy way to make better choices by starting with small steps. So with us today, we have Hasna Korda, the founder of Save Your Wardrobe, the tech startup that allows you to keep your wardrobe in your pocket, enabling connection to services that help citizens make more conscious choices and get huge and stylish satisfaction from it. Hasna will be sharing her inspiration for founding Save Your Wardrobe and tell us how, by utilising the simple tools provided, we can learn how to be more sustainable and follow the 12 steps to citizenship. We're equally privileged to have Fashion Revolution co-founder Ursula de Castro with us today, who'll be telling us about the progress achieved by her brilliant organisation since the Rana Plaza collapse in 2013 and her own personal journey to fashion citizenship. And as I said to her before, she is the original fashion citizen. She can teach us everything. Ursula and Hasna will also be sharing with us what taking that first step can mean for us in our everyday lives and what it means in theirs. After we hear from both of them, we invite you to join in. So if you have a question or you'd like to share something, you can go to participants and the raise hand button to ask questions and share your stories. You'll be asked to participate in the order that you put your hands up in. And to kick off, we'll hear from Hasna. Hello, Hasna, and it's very good to see you.
Thank you, Annie. Excited to see everyone coming and joining.
It's really lovely. Yeah. So I wanted to start off by asking you what has brought, it's going to be a big answer, but what brought you to the moment where you realised that Save Your Wardrobe was something that needed to happen?
Wow, yeah, I guess this is the journey of my life, I guess, because I'm sure a lot of you heard about the story behind Save Your Wardrobe, but for those who don't know it, I actually grew up in Tunisia, in north of Africa, and in the household I grew up with both of my grandparents and my parents and all of my 7 brothers and sisters. So there was a kind of a natural sustainability thing that environment that I grew up in. So and on top of that, actually, the anchored value of my grandparents were coming from the place that they grew up in and lived, which is an island in south of Tunisia, where everything has to be thought in a circular way, and coming to France, actually, to finish my study when I was 19 years old, it was a kind of culture shock to me to see the consumer society that is really a kind of Western way of living. And I was really surprised to see this race to consumption every weekend. People were shopping, and there were kind of social activities around that. And arriving in London, it was even at an other scale. So, and that's when I thought that there was a problem with the way we consume, and that there should be a solution that helps people change their behaviors and embrace sustainability in an easy and streamlined way.
So did you genuinely think, what are all these people doing? You were like, wow, this is crazy. Did you think we were all crazy?
I remember, so I was, okay, so I've traveled already, but it was the first time that I would travel all by myself. So I remember having thoughts. The first one is, wow, the footpath is so large here, because in Tunisia they are non-existing, and then seeing how many people were at the street and socializing and going from a shop to another and window shopping. And also it was early 2000, so it was the beginning of fast fashion, the rise of fast fashion, with the likes of H&M, Mongo. So there was already there, but not as big as now. So not as fast as now, and I didn't give it much thought. I carried on with my studies, and actually my background is in economics and corporate strategy, and the focus is how to optimize finite resources when creating wealth. So yeah, the values really that that my grandparents gave me when I grew up really followed me on in my interest in my studies and what I wanted to achieve later in the future. In my
And
future.
was there a moment where you realized that, if we all save our clothes inside our phones, that they're easier to look at, they're easier to refer to, and that would make us more conscious? Was there like a sort of eureka moment that you thought, hey, this is it, this is the idea?
This is the idea. So, so just let me tell you about an anecdote of my grandmother. So she used to produce. So she used to have everything on measure and when she needed it. So she had a seamstress and also her daughters who used to make clothes for her in real time, and to her measure. And the idea was to every dress that she wore had to be modular, so that for her she could transform it from a dress to go outside to a day dress to a nightgown to even underwear, into other things, kitchen towels, even cushions. And at the end of the life cycle of everything, they would end up in several carpets. And that thought of continuous circularity and purpose-led design helped me create Save Your Wardrobe when I saw that there was a disconnection between what people bought and the way they looked after those clothing. So it was a eureka moment. I remember in London when I was just starting my career, and I was working for a very small fashion brand. I helped to launch their flagship store in London, and I was just talking to the founder and asking her, what about sustainability? What about circularity? What about empowering women? What about? And the answers were, well, keep doing what you are doing, and leave these questions to someone to the leave them to yourself. Or so it was really quickly discarded, this kind of conversations. But I kept digging, and I thought that it was really tough to have to embrace a new lifestyle without the right tool to do it. And that's where I thought that technology and new technology of the communication could help people really understand what they have in their wardrobe in a very streamlined way. And that's why how actually Save Your Wardrobe was born. So a mix between the way I grew up and something that I've witnessed while I was in working.
That's so interesting. I mean, obviously, Ursula and I have known one another for a long time, and certainly until recently, it's hard to see things from another perspective. And your perspective, I can imagine you walking along Oxford Street and thinking we were all insane, because now I look back on my time working in the fashion industry and see that we all got carried away with it, and it's caused so many problems. Now, how would you describe, I mean, obviously you're talking to us about your understanding and realizations, but using the term fashion citizen, like, how would you describe your attitude to fashion citizenship? What is it to you?
I think there's this emergency to act, and before it's too late, and it's not just something that we should do. It's something that we have to do. It's part of being a responsible citizens. It's not we can't say we can't talk anymore about consuming responsibly, discarding responsibly. We have to act like citizens and realize that we have a duty towards the environment we live in, to it's a kind of social contract to the other people who depend on the way we consume or we buy things, and realize that this kind of duty has to be embedded in our daily lifestyle.
Mm.
And that's where I realized actually it's more than responsible consumerism. It has to be part of our of the way we behave as citizens. And what I like as well about younger generations is that they are really vocal about what they expect from brands and what they expect from the people in power, and they want to use their purchasing power to make sure that, or even the social media, to make sure that their voices are heard. And there's a big shift from consuming things and eating things towards understanding and making a kind of reflective exercise on how we are engaging with the world, engaging with the resources, and hopefully this will lead to a regenerative society that will empower as well younger generation, and give them the tool to act and build the future they want to see.
Mm. It's interesting, and it does start with what you're talking about, but it also, to begin engaging with Save Your Wardrobe, it requires a little bit of work, and that little bit of work is to open the wardrobe doors and begin to digitize, which is obviously something you have done, and it's something I've begun to do. And it's really, really eye-opening, and it does help you to engage much better with what you own. What are your biggest takeouts from your own digitizing experience?
At the beginning, it was a really nice exercise. I was really excited about the app, and then the fact that I am building the app took over a little bit and started to be a bit stressful because it's related to the success of the app. But lately, actually, we've introduced I'm sure many of you know Good On You. It's a rating system, startup that I'm really happy to call friends. And so we are collaborating and partnering, and in the app you can see how rated your past purchases, and there is a kind of awareness and an awakening on how good or bad some brands we own are. And there's this example of a very small brand, independent brand that I used to admire until Good On You told me that it's not good enough. And it was a kind of, oh no, shock. I thought this kind of small brands who produce really in small batches, and when I say small batches, like 10 bags per collection. So, and not having them, not to see them rated as well as I wanted to see them, it felt like a wake-up call as well. There's this exercise with Save Your Wardrobe that is really a wake-up call on our behaviors, and it's a tough exercise at the beginning, but I feel like it's a necessary one to reflect and be take those first steps to understand what's broken about our consumption.
Yeah. Now, I'd love to know a little bit about how you and Ursula know one another. How did you meet?
So Fashion Open Studio invited me last year in 2019 to not a speech sharing, but it was a really small event, and I was extremely excited. I couldn't handle my excitement. I managed not to show it, but I was sitting like two people from Ursula, and I was like, I will talk in the same table as Ursula de Castro, like wow. And I was like trying not to fangirl, obviously, and keep some some composure, but it was really hard. And then she said that she had this idea of wardrobe nurse, and then I crumbled. I'm here. And that's how it kicked off. And since then, Ursula has been an amazing support, both as a personal, as human person, supporting the vision of Save Your Wardrobe, but also opening her contact and contact book to introduce me to you. Actually, Melanie, we knew each other through Ursula, and And I'm extremely grateful for her support, and also for paving the way for this kind of conversation. Because I remember 2 years ago, whenever I was talking about sustainability, people were like, "Where are you? What is it that you want to talk about?" And it was really hard to open the conversation for these kind of topics. And Ursula has done such an amazing job, and I'm extremely grateful for her as well to endorse Save Your Wardrobe and see the potential that we have. And yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, Hasna. We're going to actually move over to Ursula now, and welcome, Ursula. Many of you will know her from Fashion Revolution, obviously, and we really want to find, well, first of all, thank you for coming along, and also thank you for introducing me to Hasna, and thank you for all that you do and the integrity with which you do it. Now, obviously, you've been doing Fashion Revolution now for 7 years. I wondered if you could just kick off by telling us some milestones and some numbers of what you've achieved and how things have changed since launching Fashion Revolution.
Well, I mean, numbers are complicated for me. I can go into generic numbers, but I'm completely numeric, so I would probably get them totally wrong. But I mean, everything has changed. You know, I think when we started Fashion Revolution, I already came from a background in working around in this field. First of all, as a designer, I was an upcyclist, and then as curator of Aesthetica at London Fashion Week for the British Fashion Council. So I've always been involved teaching in universities and so on. And when Rana Plaza collapsed, and Carrie Summers, who was one of the designers at Aesthetica with her award-winning brand Bachakuti, she called me and said, do something and let's start the revolution. And so we did. And it's extraordinary how fast the pace has gone since. You know, in 2013, the word transparency was just not common use, or supply chain. People didn't talk about supply chains in the supermarket. They do now. Yeah. And so it wasn't just, I think that the reality is that I feel that unlike other things that I have done before, like starting an upcycling brand in 1997, definitely too early, Fashion Revolution came just at the right time. And it proved that there was a massive appetite from many people to start having these conversations on a much more widespread and intelligent scale that had been before. I mean, I'm really lucky in London. There was such a huge, you know, group of like-minded individuals, and I feel that this movement really took a hold here. But when Fashion Revolution started, it was a catalyst in its sense that it brought more and more of these people all together. And then it spread globally, which wasn't necessarily in our original plans, I have to say. And now we have a presence in 92 countries all over the world. And we, you know, our original remit was very much around transparency because, you know, the trigger had been the Rana Plaza collapse. And then, of course, now we are much more 360 degrees working, you know, talking about the environment and raising awareness to all sorts of issues, from, you know, exploitation of people to exploitation of nature. And yes, so our, you know, in terms of numbers, I can tell you that, well, I said the number 92, we've got 92 country coordinators. Our hashtag, Who Made My Clothes, has really been used millions of times by now. We do know that. And so, yes, I mean, you know, in terms of number, this kind of social media phenomenon that we managed to become, that's Fashion Revolution.
But and what's interesting is you've changed people's attitudes in countries like Britain, but you've also changed lives of people who make the clothes. So, you know, it works both ways. It's not just about raising awareness.
Not so sure about changing lives. I mean, you know, Fashion Revolution has been, at least from when we started, we were very much a campaign around raising awareness. And we started working with policymakers later on in our initiative. Certainly, we have brought visibility to people that were previously completely unseen. If that can count as life-changing, I do not know. Certainly we have raised people, we have listened to people and amplified the voices of people such as Nazma Akhtar from the Awaj Foundation in Bangladesh, and all of our country coordinators are in their own countries, people that are at that pace facilitating what's happening in their communities. So in that sense, we've been very successful. I think the uniqueness of Fashion Revolution is that although it's very centralized, we rely on our global teams. They are the Fashion Revolution. And there was always from the very start this understanding that it's not us because we're in London and we've got this cool group of activist friends that dictate what is needed and what needs to happen. We wanted to create a coalition of people that were fashion appreciators. And that's why Fashion Revolution seems like a positive campaign rather than a grumpy campaign. But always and foremost, it was what was relevant to the people that were managing the revolution wherever it is that they are. And that has given us a very unique, behind the scene look at what is actually going on and what the different countries want and need. Things are very different in countries, for instance, where you might have a very solid base of manufacturing, but perhaps no education, or say the UK, where you have a dwindling type of manufacturing compared to what it used to be, but an incredibly strong education system. So it is really about looking at, at the minute, for instance, we're working super close with some of our OAD country coordinators, in particularly our team in Zimbabwe is doing amazing stuff with local designers. So it's important that we are focalized where our coordinators are based, and that all voices and all needs are then amplified by, the revolution.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Ursula. Now, one of the things that I'm trying to get to is, 7 years of Fashion Revolution, things have changed, things have shifted. You're activists, and we're here talking today about fashion citizenship. What do you think that means today, right now? What does fashion citizenship mean, and what should it be meaning to people who buy fast fashion and want to change? How can they change their mindset and start to think differently?
Well, if I take it down to the nitty-gritty, 100% of the population wears clothes. So even though we may think of the fashion supply chain as some kind of far away land over there, we're in the fashion supply chain every time we open our wardrobe, and the responsibility from our wardrobe onwards is ours. So, I don't know whether that's halfway through or 3/4 of the way through in the life cycle, but, we certainly do have that responsibility. I think it's about changing the culture that we are, that we've been fed by the brands. Make no mistakes. I'm sort of very much a citizen, and I very much believe in people power and citizen power. But make no mistake, the onus to change is on brands, because they've been feeding us the type of product that is creating problems. Let's be honest, product is designed not to cover a demand, but to generate it. That's how the operation has been. That's how the industry has worked. We didn't wake up one morning in the 1970s with black placards saying, give me cheap clothing and give me a ton of it. It materialized and we bought it. This is equivalent to any kind of exploitation where you're given something which is bad for you with a false hope that it will improve your life, and it doesn't, it makes it worse. So, the reality is that the fashion industry, although, again, from a point of view of love, contains so much creativity, so much heritage, it's such a female industry, textiles overall, has been completely instupidified by corporations and rendered, a fraction of what it could be. I'm not saying a fraction of what it used to be, because fashion as we know it now was designed during the Industrial Revolution, and therefore it was designed to exploit. And of course, there have been pockets of profound and beautiful dignity, and certainly many places where it's worked. But as a craft, It's a female craft that we've turned against ourselves completely. And so to be a citizen, for me, it requires time. And I don't think that we don't have it. If you think how long it takes your average customer to research the dress with the perfect fit, is it tight around the waist? Is that the right length? Is it the right color? Do that research to make it fit your principles rather than your size instead. So if you search to fit your beliefs, you will come up with a completely different product. That is if you have to buy, because it might be that if you search to fit your beliefs, you'll end up somewhere like Save Your Wardrobes, which actually encourages you to keep. If you look at things now, and I'm publishing a book on the 11th of February, which will be published by Penguin Life, and it's all about this, and it's all about keeping. The only antidote to a throwaway society is to keep. At the end of the day, we've got to keep. And keeping means that you have to manage your wardrobe and potentially slow down or not, but, learn to repair and mend if you're privileged enough to have the time to learn to repair and mend. Otherwise, use your time to demand that repair and mending is available in schools, in supermarkets, aisles, for the whole of the community, so that we can all collectively make our clothes last longer. That's really the only thing that we can do to show brands that we mean business and that we want them to change. At the end of the day, I think that this is what needs to happen. That's the only way that we can show it. And there's several ways that citizens can do. There's very few things that brand can do, and it's urgent that they start doing them.
Exactly, it's that dichotomy, isn't it? Because you said that the brands have to change, but you're also saying we have to change, and it does work both ways, and the individual can make a difference by keeping and by saving. What progress have you seen from big business?
No, near enough, and that's the point. I'm talking about this period, which is sort of hopefully an interim period. But okay, let's look at the various dichotomies and oxymorons. Actually, the fashion industry, it's like running one of those when you have to jump the obstacles, and one oxymoron after the next. But okay, so imagine the fact that there has been massive investment in recycling, for instance, while we know we don't have the technology to recycle yet. So we can't recycle mixed fibers, full stop, simple. Brands have been investing millions on this technology, but it's not getting us anywhere near there yet. For brands, recycling is very much a panacea of something that will eventually solve all problems. If you can take a bunch of clothing and turn them into their equivalent in yarn and remake them back into clothing, closed loop system, win-win, and so on and so forth. Miles from happening. In the meantime, they're still producing hundreds of thousands of here I am with numbers. I think the statistics said 150 billion garments of clothing. However, we do know that statistics are, bonkers. Anyway, an enormous amount of clothing, way more than we will ever need, way more than we will ever buy. And the people at the top of their brands are earning way more money than they will ever need. How's that just? So it's in the interim, while we begin to expose this system, which COVID has done a wonderful job at doing, like a magnifying lens on all that's wrong with us and all that needs to change before we can evolve. And in this interim period, we need to act. We need to change. We need to show that we're willing to change, but also because it will become visible more and more that we cannot manage the amount of waste that we're producing. And therefore, we need to stop thinking of waste as waste, but make it a resource that it certainly is, and employ creativity and stamina, if you don't have the creativity, in order to make a better use of it, to slow things down.
You speak complete truth and sense. But the thing I find most challenging is how do you translate that activism into somebody who would just find all of it quite overwhelming and not know where to start? Do you think, how would you give an everyday fast fashion consumer their come to Jesus moment? How could you take them by the hand gently and explain that we all have to change, and without, I don't know, because it's a lot to take on if you're just an everyday person. And that's do you think, I mean, I find that's where my passion point is how do we talk to those people who don't know where to start?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I mean, the great thing about fashion is that it's designed to be profoundly individual. So you talk to different people in very, very different ways. And to some people, you actually choose not to talk to at all, because you know that ultimately, at the end of the day, their impact is not going to be the same as somebody with, you know, for instance, somebody of a lower income. Their impact, even if they do buy Primark, is really not going to be the same as that of somebody that has a much bigger income and will splash on cheap and expensive clothing at the same time, even though they might have the cash to have it mended. But yeah. You look at who you're speaking to. I can tell you that the time that I felt I was the most successful in talking to somebody was when I talked to a 16-year-old fast fashion addict who had, for some reason, I don't know, probably she'd lost a bet or something, but was forced to sit through one of my talks at Show Studio. And at the end, she came to me and said, okay, my God, I want to change. I won't buy fast fashion anymore. And I said, no, that's a mistake. You should continue to buy fast fashion. But what you should do is that each time something breaks, you should mend it yourself or go to the trouble of have it mended. And then you should post a photograph and tag that brand and say, hey, boohoo, hey, pretty little thing. I bought this skirt, God knows, 3 months ago, wore it 3 times, and then it broke. And I don't want to buy a new one because I want to keep mine. So what's the story here? Where's the compromise? Are you going to give me better made products? Because at the end of the day, again, the onus on making better made products and making a little bit less profit, again, I put that quite happily on the brand's doorstep. Or is the answer that you get a boohoo return system where things are mended by somebody lovingly, locally, and then returned? So, you know, because brands need to take their responsibility for the cheap products that they peddle. And so, you know, and that was something that I would remind people, that if you buy from love and choose to keep, at the end of the day, that is in itself what needs to be seen, because we're not all going to stop buying clothing. And again, we're all going to have different pathways to follow. There's no point in going on a diet if you're not going to follow through. There is no point for someone like me to decide to go something free when I don't really care about that something. There's no point in doing it all. But inside your gut feeling, there's going to be a starting point for everyone. And that you can follow through, because it's going to be as small as you feel. And then can grow, and it will grow as your journey advances. That's the other thing that I can suggest.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's raising awareness at the right time. How do you feel about the fashion industry? A lot of wealthy women doing sustainability and making clothes that are largely unaffordable. Do you feel that helps the cause or not?
I think at the moment we're all being duped, because luxury is producing clothing that is not necessarily that brilliantly made. The fabrics aren't that ecological, nor necessarily luxury. Most of the luxury sector, actually luxury and premium, actually produces right next door, if not in the same cluster as the high street. So from luxury, we're getting a product that is way too expensive, and our money is going to glossify the inside of their stores. And from the high street, we're getting something which is way too cheap, and we know somebody else is paying, people and nature. Not that nature isn't paying for the excesses of the luxury as well. So, you know, it's the whole of the fashion industry that needs to come into question. I mean, the reality is that when it comes to price and the fact that sustainable fashion is for sure more expensive, sustainability to a certain extent and activism does look like me, does look like us. And, you know, hopefully the activism in itself will evolve faster than the mainstream industry it's actually trying to antagonize. So we shouldn't be emulating something that we're trying to antagonize. But, you know, of course, there's always going to be the rich person that can afford and the one that can't. It's how we stigmatize them. That's the thing, you know. So we should apply our stigmas a little bit more freely to the people who potentially deserve them more. And maybe nowadays we can start looking at a cultural shift whereby it's excess that is stigmatized, as repairing was maybe 100 or 50, or even nowadays in certain cultures. So we have to pick I wouldn't want to say our enemies, because I hate talking in military terms, but we have to pick who we are going to be, differing from. And
very good point. Yeah. It's a very good point that you make, because it is about success. And I wonder, have you considered, or do you digitize or maintain a digital wardrobe for your clothes as yet?
Okay, so here comes the confession. I've just moved into my new house, and what you see behind me is my wardrobe. Now, I'm quite private about my surroundings, but it does go on and on and on. So I would break the app, if not the internet, if I started digitizing my wardrobe. I am a clothes keeper, 100%. But just to let you know, recently, for instance, having written a whole book on keeping, I found myself having to throw, because I moved into a house which is half the size the house I was in before. And I also had a brand that I had closed however many years ago. So I had stock left over from my own brand, which closed in 1914, simply because I have not ever thrown anything away. And this was the first time that I had to do it. And actually, I'm going to think about creating a method, because it worked very well. I kept as much as I possibly could, but I curated all of my donations. I'm definitely not a Marie Kondo that just, and give away. No, I gave with such, everything I gave had a journey, and it needed to be given for that reason. And that is something, again, that we need to think about. There's no point donating your old bikinis to a refugee camp. And there is no point donating something to charity if it's broken, because that it's just going to get landfill. So donating to a charity these days ought to really be a gift. You ought to be giving things that you may not want anymore, but you should give it to them improved rather than destroyed to the end. And so this is something that I did. I spent an awful lot of time. So that would have been useful to have digitized, but no, I couldn't digitize my own wardrobe. But I am a complete fan of Hasna, and she's not told you the truth. I muscled myself into her board, playing completely on my seniority and privilege when we met. I said, as Hasna, I'm on your board whether you like it or not. So yeah, I can be very pushy when I want to, but not the digitization, but everything else. But that's the brilliant thing about Hasna. This is a technology that marries us with our instincts.
Indeed.
This something completely instinctive, which is sorting your wardrobe. I'm messy, I wouldn't sort my wardrobe, but there will be something else in her technology that will work for me. And it'll probably be around finding like-minded individuals to swap and share with, or having things mended. I'll create my own community, but we all have to do the things that are right for us. So no digitization for me, but a ton load of crochet. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Ursula. That was wonderful to hear you. And I've just begun the journey to digitizing, and it's like the memories that come up and the things you reuse and outfit planning, all those little things that are coming and happening to me. Now, we've reached the end of hearing from our amazing Hasna and Ursula. Now, if anyone would like to ask any questions, we have some time left. We can slightly run over if we want to, we've decided. And if do raise your hand in the participants box, and if you've got any questions, do ask them, because we're here to chat. Do we have any takers?
So there is a question from Emily. I don't know if you want to speak, or if we should ask the question for you, Emily. If you want to unmute yourself and take part, you are welcome. So the question she asked is, how do you see the future of fashion citizenship when the garments will have QR codes at a great scale?
Yeah, I can take that one. I happily take that one. So yeah, it's a very relevant question, and it's something that's been brewing in the industry for as long as possible, for maybe too long. So having a digital ID for government to track them. So there are two answers. The one that is, oh, scary, you will be knowing what I'm doing with my clothes and so on. But what I've realized as well, talking to our users and our communities, that people are longing for traceability and transparency. And as long as they have answers to their questions, they wouldn't mind having that QR code that would improve the aftercare system as well. So we haven't spoken a lot of local workshops, local dry cleaner, local menders, local restoration, but they all actually relied before COVID into physical and manual processes. And the problem now with the whole pandemic is that the workshop has closed, and they now have to face the digital transformation without really the right capabilities. And lots of them actually came to Save Your Wardrobe and asked us for support for that tech. And part of it is those QR code enabled tracking system or traceability system. And I feel like if we want to do our part and really scale the sustainability in the aftercare, we have, especially in a society where I would just quote my grandmother saying, "You are too lazy, you are a lazy crowd." If this society is actually somehow lazy, you have to give in something and to make sure that the end goal is achieved.
Emily, is that a good answer for you? Do we have any other questions? If anyone's feeling shy, you're very welcome to tap and write the question into the chat box and we'll ask it, or we can see the question and Ursula or Hasna could answer for you.
Also, I'd love to hear stories about people. I know I've seen Rosalind from Repair What You Wear. I'm seeing familiar faces. So if you want to jump in and give your opinion on topics and not necessarily asking a question, please feel free to do it.
I think Rosalind would like to ask something. Unmute yourself, Rosalind. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everybody. Very nice to see you, Hasna and Ursula and Melanie. I was interested, Ursula, when you were talking about working with a 16-year-old and encouraging them to mend and then to tag the brand. How much do you think we can really get into that? I mean, I'm wanting to encourage everybody to mend and give them the skills to mend. I know that a lot of young people are interested in doing it, although they haven't formally been taught. The brands, do you think that they will engage with that sort of tagging?
I don't know. I think it depends on the brand. And to be honest with you, I mean, I don't know right now, but they will, of course, 100%. So we've got statistics that say that the secondary market is growing 10 times faster than fast fashion. So I know that the brands have got their antennas up and they've seen an opportunity. The reality is that, you know, as you quite rightly say, the opportunity shouldn't be for the brands, it should be for citizens. And the opportunities shouldn't be to spend more money to have things mended by the brand that sold it to you in the first place, but it should be on brand potentially, you know, to spend their money to strengthen our educational system, to introduce mending, you know, in the curriculum, and, you know, compulsorily in communities, so that, you know, again, I mean, why don't we have mending stations in every supermarket? You know, why is that not happening? How long does it take to fix a broken hem for somebody that's capable and has done it hundreds of times? You know, so the question is, for me, the distinction between encouraging people to do it themselves and at the same time ensuring that we're speaking truth to power, whether that's the supermarket or the school, in order to have it available, widely available, community-wide. I follow your work as I use another company called The Clothes Doctor, where I have my clothes mended. And, you know, there is another brilliant company in London, The Seam, which puts you in touch with local seamstresses. And I am in touch with also local seamstresses. So I keep scouting for it. But I come from a generation where they were around every corner. And in Italy, to a certain extent, there's still a little bit more than, you know, mending, community mending than what there is here. But going back to the 16-year-old, you know, it was a beautiful moment. I've been in other moments like that. I was in Copenhagen and I taught, repairing, darning clothes to a bunch of 16-year-old boys who'd never done anything like it. And they enjoyed it surely as much as scrolling on their phone, for sure, for a couple of hours. But it's really creating those opportunities, which is why I'm such an admirer of the work that you do and the campaign that you've just launched, which I've signed and shared. And because
Thank
I
you.
do believe, we need to get together, because mending should be for everyone. And we should find ways to reach everyone to mend or have things mended.
Well, as you know, I'm on the case with education and with supermarkets, actually. And only this week, on a different note, everybody, I've nailed the reasons why I can't get mending instructions into supermarkets. It's because of the control, the messaging control. And so in terms of mending specifically, and also in terms of reducing consumption, we have to find ways of communicating out into the broader audience that is not scary, but engages the commercial companies without them worrying about losing their turnover.
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel a little bit, obviously, I'm a few years ahead of you when it comes to the amount of campaigning I've done. And I've gotten to the point in which I am actually quite prepared to scare brands into action now. So while the whole point of starting Fashion Revolution again was this inclusive thing, I've been a huge fan, for instance, of the Pay Up campaign, which has been much more aggressive than Fashion Revolution in addressing brands not paying their garment workers. And I am going to inject a little bit of my anger and frustration into the messaging around mending, because as I said, why don't they pay for mending stores, in mending corners in every stores? I mean, that's a hell of a lot better than a voucher to get some, bring back something old and buy something new at a discount. That to me is completely the wrong messaging. But to bring back your clothes and have them mended for a moderate price, that would be the way forward for brands.
Yes, it would. It would give a lot of people confidence too. And it would, yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that dialogue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Özlem. We have a question from Amrusa Shroff, and it is, how do we go about to remove the stigma around used garments which re-enter the system?
I'd love to share a story of something that came actually from Italy to Tunisia. While the two countries were often communicating together. So there used to be, when I grew up, something called Ruba Vikia. So someone going from the streets and asking people to donate things that they wouldn't wear or they want to discard. And this guy would bring back those garments to his family and wife and daughters who had the skills to mend and repair and build something out of them. And then the next day he would come back to the neighborhood and sell this stuff next day or next week. Yeah. And there is a beautiful story about those skills and that craftsmanship that is put into clothing that's been used, and when you see them as a disposable thing, they could actually be a new story, especially if we add to them that craft and that know-how that unfortunately is a little bit lost or is on the verge of being lost. So there's that adding storytelling to clothing, and that's a kind of a little bit of emotional connection to them can fight that stigma and yeah, facilitate as well reuse of old things.
I'm going to be a little bit more technical on this one, and I'm going to just, use the power of fashion history. Fashion is cyclical. So, in the 80s, we did the 60s, in the 90s, we did the 70s, it goes on and on and on. It's part of our culture also for that reason. The minute you get your power, you remember what you were like, 20 years before, and you kind of crave what you thought was cool then. So it's about making it acceptable. And, I feel that we're in, the stigma, the fashion industry can help a lot aesthetically to make these clothing covetable. And right now I mentor young designers from all over the world who work this way, as a designer, to actually work with things that are already there comes quite instinctively. And we've seen throughout history fashion aesthetics that have totally been about, I mean, grunge, hello. If you look at the catwalks today, they are completely rife with clothes that look like they could have been upcycled, but actually weren't. They were made from scratch. The whole aesthetic of broken jeans, which have been broken manufacturedly, using chemicals and all, I mean, but that is actually telling you that we find huge comfort in the aesthetic of the used. Go into any kind of, you know, trendy, bloody East End restaurant when you still could, they all look like they've just picked up the plates from some, you know, next door jumble cell. So we respond to that. At least some of us do. So, and right now we're actually risking stigmatizing the opposite. Right now, I would dare to say that secondhand and mending is beginning to look a hell of a lot hotter and cooler than getting out of Primark with 5 shopping bags. So we're beginning to stigmatize poverty the other way around. So the poverty of buying something new rather than the richness, unfortunately, the nicheness of keeping something old, which is what's happening now. So that's what I was going back to today. We need to be careful where we put our stigma. Because we always try and stigmatize the poor, you know, whether you're poor because you've got a pair of repaired trousers, or you're poor because you've got a bag of, you know, of a cheap brand bag, Primark, Zara, whatever, on your hand, you're being stigmatized against. Let's stigmatize excess on the other hand. Let's make that the sort of, you know, unpleasant, unpalatable manifestation.
Thank you, Hasna. That's such valuable insight, and the stigmatizing thing is hugely valuable. Now we have Christine G who has a question. Christine, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Melanie. Hi, thanks for the great session, Melanie, Hasna, Ursula, thank you. Yeah, maybe I'm just looking to find this into the future, and but just in general, one would think like, okay, if we actually convince more and more people to stay away from high street, to reuse more, to mend more, and it all sounds great, but what kind of impact does that actually have in the value chain? What kind of impact does it actually have if now suddenly the brand produces hundreds of thousands less of items of clothing a day or a week or whatever?
Well, I have to reply to this immediately because it doesn't relate. So a garment worker in Myanmar will train for 2.5 days. They will learn how to do a curvy, a straight, and a zigzag. They will be paid by the piece and not by the hour. They will not allowed to unionize, and they will be, working under unsafe conditions. I mean, this is in Myanmar or many of the producing countries, which, by the way, include Leicester and include Italy and include several places that you would never dream that people are being paid below the living wage and working in unsafe conditions, right behind our noses. So, and yet, the actual price of a t-shirt...
Ursula, we've lost you there.
Oh, am I back?
There we go. There you go. Thank you.
The price of a t-shirt will change very little. It's affected very little. The reality is that it is precisely those brand owners that need to take the pay cut these days. You know, we need to address things such as redistribution, because the truth is, as I said before, that there's a bunch of people at the top that are making billions that they will never ever need, and millions of people at the bottom that are in need. So that can't be right. And therefore, when you address fast fashion or cheap fashion and you think, okay, let's really slow down, you do it from the point of view of providing dignified work to the people who make our clothes in the first place. You do it by skilling the workforce. That will inevitably mean that certain clothing will be less cheap, because it's really far to say that they will be expensive. There's the technology now not to make them. But who's going to take that cut? So far, it's been the earth and the workers. In the future, it shouldn't be that way around.
Absolutely, exactly. So yeah, so great to hear that from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine, and for Ursula. And now we have Annalise, who would like to ask a question. Would you like to unmute yourself, Annalise?
Okay.
Thank
Hello,
you.
good afternoon. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Ursula. And
Guys, I'm so
Asna.
sorry, but I literally have to go because I've got parents' evening for my daughter in 5 minutes. So I've got 5 minutes and then I'm going to have to rush.
Okay, first question for you, because I imagine that all of you live in London, in England. I live in Madrid, in Spain.
Great.
And I would like to know how to engage people to keep close, to appeal secondhand, or to be more into sustainability, because here is like we are very away from this kind of conversation you have right now.
Please immediately go and support Fashion Revolution Spain. It's one of our strongest
I
teams.
am.
They've been okay, because I would say that they will potentially have a lot of answers for that, you know, to how to engage your community, how to work. But, you know, if you think, how are trends made? Trends are made by people leading by examples and others following. So provided you keep on talking truth to power and engage in as many initiatives as you possibly can yourself and talk about those to people, then you are leading by example, therefore making your own trend. Hopefully it will take.
Yeah, but when we talk with people, I look like the grumpy activists and the grumpy campaign, because they are like, oh, that's so annoying. I want to buy something cheap and then keep it for short time. And this is Inditex Kingdom, Sarah Kingdom.
You have to keep applying pressure. You know, sometimes it happens fast, other times it takes a lot of time. But overall, you know, the power of persuasion is the art that you will need to practice. There is no simple way.
Yeah, I know.
You know, there are several different ones, but not one that's simple. And this is definitely not a one size fits all situation.
Thank you, Ursula.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Annelies, and thank you, Ursula. I know you have to go. You've got your parental duties to attend to.
Parental duties, yep, absolutely. I've got I can't remember the drama teacher. No, I think it's Spanish actually. I think I've got the Spanish teacher first. Yeah.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, we'll say goodbye to you, Ursula, and thank you very much again. It was wonderful to hear you.
So much, Hasna.
Bye.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you, darling. Good to see you. Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.
And if there are any further questions anyone has, do let us know in the chat. And if not, we can say, woohoo, we've done Save Your Wardrobe Sessions 1, and we've had a great, really interesting conversation, many interesting points of view. Hasna?
Yeah, I'm super grateful for everyone who joined us today and had an open mind to listen to what we had to do, and also it's a first step towards the journey. And I think that many of you are already educated on the urgency of sustainable fashion and ethical fashion. So I'm really glad that we were able to gather this crowd and talk about it all together and share opinions.
I agree. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. And we'll be doing these on a regular basis with various different people and various different conversations. But today was about the idea that we are all fashion citizens and not fashion consumers, and how I think that you know, both Hasna and Ursula have given us an excellent sort of starting position to carry on from. So yeah, if everyone's happy, we can say goodbye and keep your eyes peeled for our next one.
Yes, looking forward to see you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a good evening.
You all.